Hey everyone, welcome back to Opinion Party, the podcast where we take a new, fresh look at the most pervasive myths in marketing and examine them through the cold, cruel lens of data. I'm your co-host, Laura Jones.
I'm Jason Gaikowski.
And today we're tackling the topic of the brand purpose pivot. Jason, let's kick this off. We're going to get right into it. What's your purpose, man?
What's my purpose?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just jumped on my LinkedIn and you're going to find that my purpose is to rehumanize the business of business.
Ooh.
Pretty abstract, but
wordy words. I love it. What does that mean?
Wordy words. So, look, I'm excited about this topic. I can't wait to dig in a little bit with Samuel. I think purpose is a really, really interesting topic for marketing and marketers. As you know, I was client side for a few years, and we absolutely built brands, built business, created categories, and it was very much a purpose-driven industry and a purpose-driven company. That said, the data is kind of here and there on purpose, right? Like on one side, we've seen enormous growth, 1,000-fold growth in B corporations. There's now more than 6,000 B Corps registered, representing hundreds of categories across 80 companies. That's groovy.
Yeah.
We see capital flows into ESG funds continuing to grow at a really, really rapid pace. Capital flows into ESG funds has gone north of $53 trillion, representing about 1/3 of all invested capital. Super interesting. There's been some really, really interesting research that shows that purpose-driven and ESG-driven corporations outperform their peers over 5 and 10-year time horizons. And even when it comes to brand value, an analysis showed that purpose-driven firms grow their brand value at a rate of 150% plus of their non-purpose-driven peers, right? Super interesting.
Sounds like a great case for purpose. What's the catch, Jason?
Well, I mean, let's talk about Unilever, who under the previous CEO was very much a leader in the marketplace, an evangelist and champion for purpose, right? They made it a policy across their entire brand portfolio that all of their brands should be purpose-driven. And, Dove is a kind of obvious and notable example of the success that has followed from that. Yet, in the past several years and under the new CEO, they've really softened that commitment, and they've taken a perspective that purpose may be right for some brands. Purpose isn't necessarily a magic bullet for all brands. And I think when we look at our BAV data, there's in fact a case to be made that purpose may not be a silver bullet. When you look at how purpose correlates to strength, you see a kind of positive differentiation. But interestingly enough, the correlation to differentiation is not what I would have assumed it would be. Right? The correlation to differentiation is only slightly more than half of the correlation to brand strength. Right? What you actually see in the data is that the purpose perceptions most strongly correlate with esteem, which, as you and I both know, tends to be a bit of a lagging indicator.
Absolutely.
And while we do see that there is a nice statistical relationship between purpose and usage, interesting, there is far less of a correlation to purpose and preference. So when we look at the data, I think that's a little bit unclear. I think that there's still much to be learned in this arena. I think that there's enough evidence in the world that purpose is at least worth evaluating. and that for many brands, it can be a winning strategy, but may not be a silver bullet for every brand.
Yeah, and that's so fascinating what we're seeing in the data. And you're saying the purpose-driven attributes correlating more with what we would refer to as stature than strength, because those are metrics of current operating value. And, almost by definition, purpose is very visionary, is very future focused, is very change oriented, right? So there is a bit of a disconnect there for sure. And I wonder, maybe, and I can't wait to bring Samuel on because we will definitely have some more point of view and data on this. Maybe we're just not measuring it right. Maybe there's something about people's actions, people's intentions, and just the intangibility and the uncertainty of the future that, maybe people aren't visionary enough to, maybe companies are not visionary enough to really recognize and communicate purpose. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. And yeah, I'm excited to dive in. Any last bits of knowledge before we bring Samuel on?
I think your hypothesis is a fair one. And what we do see in the data is that super leadership brands like Microsoft and Google score high for purpose. But of course, they score high for everything. Interestingly enough, when you go and look at some of the brands that come first to mind as purpose-driven brands, Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's, right?
Yep.
Classic examples. Those brands don't have the level of strength and the level of stature that I might have thought, right? So it might be that purpose is a strategy that gets you from good to great, but it may not be the strategy that gets you from great to super leadership. I don't know, right? I think there's a ton to learn here. I can't wait to dig in with Samuel, and let's get this party started, Laura.
Yeah.
Let's get the party started.
Absolutely. Samuel Monnie, Purpose Hive co-CEO. Welcome to Opinion Party. I'm going to be
Thanks for
so
having
excited.
Me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, let's give everyone a little bit of your expertise, your background. Samuel Monnie was a reform marketer, but is now a marketing reformer. His words, brilliant. He's going to trademark them. And
So
is
jealous.
Purpose Hive co-founder and co-CEO, which is a strategic brand purpose consultancy. So we've got the right guest on the podcast for the topic today. Okay. He's the former SVP of revenue for sustainable brands, and he's got lots of experience at all of these big companies. We're talking about purpose-driven P&G, Campbell's, where actually we had the good fortune of meeting on a client project, Grainger and Safeway. He is actually a fellow marketing podcast co-host. He's co-host of the Marketing Transform podcast, and he's also an adjunct professor at DePaul University, where he's taught international business and brand strategy. Fun facts, he's from the UK of Ghanaian heritage. He's lived in Germany and Switzerland and now resides in the NYC area. And he's an avid fan of Manchester United Football Club, connoisseur of Indian food, and always ensures music is within earshot. So again, Samuel, happy to have you at the party. And let's just kick it off. Let's get right into it.
Okay.
I'm curious, what initially inspired you to champion purpose and purpose-driven growth in the corporate world that seemingly, you've spent a lot of time in, that often prioritizes profit over purpose?
Yeah, I think throughout my marketing career, I've been, one of my superpowers, which I know is not the question you asked me, but I'm going to tell you anyway. One of my superpowers is curiosity. So I've always been, what's that? So that if you listen to my bio, you're like, what? He's done what? He's lived where? And the story of my life is, oh, what's that? Where is that? Why shouldn't I go? Why shouldn't I do that? Or what's going on there? So I think with curiosity comes great responsibility, because if you're curious, you've got to follow up on that itch or that question or that observation or that confusion, or I don't get it. It's like, let me learn more, or why do they do that? Let me go find out. So, for example, earlier in my career, I went to Northern Ireland and I studied there, and everyone told me, because this was during the Troubles, don't go to Northern Ireland. It's scary. It's like, oh, you told me not to go. Now I have to go. So I went and studied there for a year. It was wonderful. So the worst thing you can do is tell me not to do something or like question it, because that piques the curiosity. So I think as a marketer, I've always been invested in raising the bar. I did a lot of work in marketing capabilities. I've taught as an adjunct, and the beauty of learning and knowledge is that you kind of find out more things, and you have to sort of progress, and you have to, go forward. And so with that, purpose was one of those areas where in business, and if you look at business, the last 30 or so years of capitalism has taught you that this is the way, but that's not always been the way of business. And so the founders of a lot of the industrial companies that we know today, like Lifebuoy, the soap companies, all these, people were dying of bad hygiene. So they created soap as a solution to stop the bad hygiene. And guess what? That's why soap exists. So things like soap have always been purposeful because they were there to stop people dying. And so when people say, oh, just focus on the profit and the business, well, why do you create the product in the first place? And so I've got a bunch more stories that can bring that to life. But I think purpose has always been there. And now the question is, what do we mean by purpose? How do we define it? And I have a definition, which I can share shortly. But I think that's why purpose has always been there. But now it's gone from sort of behind the scenes, sort of, just gestating into, aha, this is an unlock that helps us towards a flourishing future.
Yeah. And I've always loved that about you, Samuel. Every time we have a conversation or I say, where did that come from? You're such a great, almost archaeologist or anthropologist of history, and of going all the way back to the source. And that can oftentimes lead to just things that were always right there in front of our eyes, but everyone kind of lost sight of. As I mentioned, Samuel's a former and current podcast host, and he's just asked himself the next question, because that was my next question, which is how do you define brand purpose? And why is it crucial for modern business?
Great question. And like, whose show is this again? Okay, so the way I defined brand purpose is the thesis is that business organizations can have a positive impact on humanity and nature while making a profit simultaneously. So that's it. Positive impact, humanity, nature, and planet, if you want to add that in, while being profitable simultaneously, which means it's not either or, it's and. Now, I know that if you're a non-profit, then change the word profit for revenue or money coming in. That's basically why you're there. And so whether it's accessibility, biodiversity, women's rights, gun safety, ethical AI, sustainability, DEI, all of those things can be done while being profitable at the same time. And there are a bunch of brands, companies, organizations doing that. And so get on the train, join this movement to raise the bar, and yes, make money, and also have that positive impact on your immediate audience, your community, and the world at large. It is possible. It's doable. We should do it to get us to where we need to be. And it was great listening into some of the data and evidence being shown. We've all got evidence and data points to say why purpose is important or why folks can do it. And, maybe we can share some of the examples that I'm passionate about that I would say support the case.
Please do so. Yeah, because I would say, and yet, right? All of those things that you have mentioned and why it makes sense for people, profit, planet, and can be a win-win, mutual benefit, all of that bunches of stats. And yet we're still having this debate, right? And so what are some of the examples, to add into that mix as to companies that are doing it well? And what have they gotten right? What are they seeing that everyone else is kind of missing the point on?
Well, I think we should start with just what are some data points that are true with evidence and supporting. So if you think of a brand like Ben & Jerry's, which is used a lot, and you could argue, what has ice cream got to do with anything good? And the founders were, I think, from Vermont, and they were part of this movement, and they had these ideals and values that they just infused in their business. So their values that they deem important, they just argue in favor for and support and want others to at least know about them and participate. Now, you could argue, how purposeful are you being, or how much of an activist are you if you're eating ice cream on your sofa? However, they have brought in dairy-free products into the portfolio, and they're just trying to get us to be more conscious. And I was looking at their site the other day, and I'm going to just go look at my screen because I captured this data. So after the election in the US, when we're recording this, the data says that 76% of people support LGBTQ rights, 70% support taking action on climate change, 60% support stronger gun laws, and 85% of Americans support access to abortion. So if the data is, you can argue some of the numbers, but those are pretty robust in terms of the majority of people support these things. So they're just saying, hey, we support this, let's get on with it. It's not partisan, it's not political, it's most people. So when you have data that suggests most people, if not, as I say, 76%, 3/4 of people support LGBTQ rights, then having a stance on this is not controversial. It's not picking a side, it's not being political, it's actually just doing and representing and advocating for what is essentially what most people want. And I think that's where people get lost or mistaken. What does the evidence say? This is called opinion party. So if I'm telling you 3/4 of people agree on something, now you may not like it, but it doesn't change the fact. And also as an organization, then you should have confidence. And I know some do and some don't, but what is the data? What do your audiences want? What are you good at? What does the world need? What can you make? These are some of the questions you can ask yourself as a business or brand before you start doing purpose. And I think a lot of, so I picked Ben & Jerry's, which is probably safe territory as an example. I can give you a few more, but there's actually another organization I'm a huge fan of, and it's called Plantega. Plantega is essentially a brand that supports plant-based ingredients in deli sandwiches, and they have launched in the New York City area, and they basically work with the bodegas. Now, bodegas have an issue because they're under threat from other retailers, and they're in local communities, and so bodega owners are looking for revenue, right? So this is like, we need stuff to help us make more money, and Plantega brings this menu items of plant-based deli sandwiches, which are delicious, and their chorizo wrap, delicious. And so I'm eating this chorizo wrap going, well, why do I need a proper chorizo in my life? Because this is delicious. What's in here? So if it's delicious, then I will eat it and people will buy it. And so you've got something that is delicious, that is meeting a commercial need, business need of an organized, of a community, of a bunch of communities, and better for planet and better for the world. So that's purpose and profit. That's delicious and revenue. It's not either or, it's just both. And so the idea that purpose is a compromise or lesser than or a trade down or even more expensive is not always the case. It's often not the case. And so I'm just going to bring examples of brands that are, that prove that purpose works, and there is an abundance of them. So I'm focusing more on what purpose is and examples of what works versus trying to defend the attacks on purpose.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things here, Samuel, that I really love. Very consistent with my work, right? Like when you look at the evolution of business, mm-hmm. and you go even pre-industrial revolution, the only reason business ever evolved in the first place, right? Specialization in trade, the early origins of business, is about solving problems that improve the human condition, right? Like when you look at the pattern time and time and time again, almost every business got invented to solve a specific problem, mm-hmm. that made people's lives easier and better, right? And that happens all the way through the Industrial Revolution. And what I observe in the world now is that businesses and brands tend to succeed to some degree or another, either by improving the human experience, mm-hmm. or by exploiting human vulnerability, right? Let's call it predatory lending. Hmm. Let's call it addictive products with very clear and consequential negative health effects, right? So I think there's something interesting about this duality of pathways to success. And I expect you're familiar with Michael Porter's work, and he argues, in my estimation, quite convincingly, that business is very well suited to address social problems and social change, because by generating a profit, it allows you to scale, right? And I think these are really, really compelling pieces of evidence to support purpose. And yet, Bud Light invests in some communications to be supportive and more inclusive of a marginalized community, and things for them go horribly awry. What do we think's going on there? I'd love to kind of get your take on why that seemingly purpose-driven step generated what certainly to them was wildly unexpected negative effects.
So here is what I would say is bad marketing is bad marketing. Bad idea is a bad idea. Bad creative is bad creative. And this probably will go globally, but for me, there is like, see the Bud Light example, which was, there are issues with the execution and the choice and how it was portrayed and then the statement. So I think that was a compromised execution, shall we say, and then the wherewithal to kind of stand behind what they did, and then it didn't. So it just created this spiral of doom. Let's just say that was because obviously I just started off this with data about supporting LGBTQ rights. Most people agree. So the values of supporting that community is unwavering from my side. The what and the how were problems, but I think bad marketing is bad marketing. And my frustration is that there seems to be this thing where people are poking and complaining about purpose. Now, we all live in the US, and I think there are three other tyrannies. The tyrannies of the clickbait, bad digital ads that you get when you mistakenly press a button on a website and then it takes you to this site. That should be stamped out. The awful used car dealership ads that you see on Sundays on TV, they are an abomination. Why is no one protesting and boycotting them? And of course, the legal lawyers billboard ads that you see driving up and down the highway, which are horrendous. No one is protesting the bad billboards. So they're not saying cancel all billboards. Or the sorry to the sports fans here, Chicago White Sox. I was looking at this Major League Baseball team. They won 40 games. They won 25% of the games. They must say cancel baseball. Baseball is awful because one team suck in playing the sport. They you still have the World Series. You still carry on playing. So there seems to be this vitriol against purpose. Yet Margaret Rudkin, who was she? So I worked for Campbell's Soup, Campbell's own Pepperidge Farm. Pepperidge Farm is the bakery brand. Margaret Rudkin's son had allergies and was suffering from asthma and allergies, and the food exacerbated the problem. So she was trying to solve this problem, and she came up with baking bread. And this bread that her son ate did not cause any negative reaction. In fact, it was claimed that it was healthy. It helped his condition, so much so that everyone wanted this bread that Margaret was baking. And that's what led to the founding of Pepperidge Farm bread, because her son had allergies, couldn't eat the food. She needed to solve because the medical profession couldn't solve it. So to your point as to the reason behind Pepperidge Farm, that's why Margaret Rudkin was the entrepreneur that she was and made the bread. So this bread was because her son had a problem. So often, as you said, there are good meritorious reasons. And so the reason I define purpose about positive impact, because yes, we know that the brain can be hacked, humanity can be sucked into a vortex of negativity. So you can design products to exploit people. You can build products that exploit the planet, right? That are extractive and damaging and harmful. So the idea of the more sustainable practices, the better for you, better for planet, reusable materials, repairable products and services, returnable, recyclable. All of these things are because you can exploit people or the resources, and we need to stop doing that. And having purpose means that you think about your packaging, you think about your supply chain, you think about the wages that you pay people. There's a brand called Pinatex, which was, I think the Dole company was part of that. So basically, pineapple farmers, they don't get paid for all the fruit that they make because a lot of it is the skin and all that, and that's all waste, and that's thrown away. but not if you repurpose that material into a fabric called Pinatex, which, yes, it's not fully biodegradable because of the way they treat it, but you take that waste and you repurpose it into a vegan leather, because there's a bunch of people who won't buy real leather because they're against animal harm and animal cruelty. You turn this waste into something that can actually be commercialized into a fabric. The farmer gets paid more because now their waste is of value. The waste is not just thrown into landfill or whatever. The waste is turned into a commercial product that you sell for a profit. So think about things that were waste. There's a brewing company. Their name's gone from me, but basically they take all the yeast. Yeast is a byproduct for a lot of processes. They take the yeast, and basically people pay to throw away this surplus. So they take it for free, and that's their free raw ingredient to make a plant-based product that they're now commercializing. So basically other people's waste is their treasures. So we can always think about innovation and think of it in a more purposeful way. We can think about challenges and infuse purpose to solve the problem. We can think about inequities and think about how we pay the farmer more fairly, but solve the problem without it being charitable. Well, let's turn that waste product into something we can repurpose. So, okay, that's at least a 4-minute soapbox moment. I put it to you, my lad and my lady, to the judge.
Well, I loved everything you said. And the one observation of all of the P words that we just mentioned that I think bears repeating is product. And, back to the Bud Light example, let's look at the data. Again, sales of light beer are declining. Customer and people's preferences have changed, right? So not only is purpose something, bad marketing is bad marketing and creative is bad creative, but you can't just throw a campaign or a strategy on top of a product with a fundamental, challenge in the marketplace and expect purpose to be the thing that changes. And in fact, that in contrast with the Pepperidge Farm example that you shared, which I love. I'm a mom of a daughter with food allergies, and that one hits really close to home. Is like nobody with food allergies nobody without food allergies is negatively affected by having a superior product, but it can be so much more inclusive to bring people with food allergies. And I think that's really also another byproduct of great purpose-driven business building, right? Is bringing other people along on the journey.
Absolutely. So the phrase that I think I stole this from Mark Pritchard, who's the chief brand officer at P&G, is purpose should be built in, not bolted on. Or in the case of bread, it should be baked in, not bolted on. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. That's a dad joke for everyone. I'm not a parent, but I'm very good at dad jokes. So
I love dad jokes.
So purpose needs to be built into what you do. And an example, so now this is opinion party, so I'm just going to bring everyday examples. So
bring it.
For example, in New York, you'll see that a lot of streets have the curved edge. So the streets sort of, there's an indentation so that you can roll up the curve. The curve is not fully flush all the way through. Now, you may think, oh, well, that's, this wokeism, they're making all the curbs lower so for people with disabilities. And, how many people are there? The biggest user of those are delivery people, right? Because they have to wheel it stuff in and out of those stores and bodegas and all these things. So everyone uses the ramp, not just people who need to use the ramp. The ramp is not lowering the bar. The ramp is not causing inconvenience. It's better for everyone. So to your point of food that is better for folks who have allergies, it is also for everyone. There's a restaurant chain called Le Botaniste, organic plant-based meals, food that they create. And as if people look at me, you don't get this physique if you're shy of food. So I love to eat. I'm a carnivore. But Le Botaniste is this is the first restaurant, organic plant-based. I walk in, smells delicious. I walk out, I have my meal, and I'm full. And I don't think, oh, I wish there was a bit of chicken, or I wish there was a bit of beef in there, because it is delicious. And so you don't need to be vegan in order to benefit from this product or this service or this offering.
Yeah. I think that inclusive design, right, is Microsoft was one of the biggest champions of that. And, that goes to my next question, right? My next examination of purpose through the lens of, is, progress versus perfection,
Oh.
right? In an ideal world, purpose is built from the ground up. It is baked in, it is on the business plan. And that's great for companies that have started in this kind of post-purpose world the last 10 years, all the rise of B Corps. But what happens if you're a legacy brand? How can you maybe seemingly take a brand that's gone so far away from its purpose and tell that in an authentic and meaningful way? Do you think it's possible?
I think it's possible, but you've got to think about, what can you do? What is authentic to you? What are your values as an organization? What do you care about, and what can you be held accountable for? So that's a starting point. What do your audiences? Another thing is, what do your audiences care about? Your stakeholders, your people or employees. What do they care about? What does the world need? And what can you do? So those are some fundamental questions that you can ask yourself. But I have found, by and large, certainly the companies I've worked at, I'd mentioned Pepperidge Farm. So I worked for Campbell Soup. James Dorrance was the creator of condensed soup. Now, this was not so long after the company was founded. It created condensed soup, and what condensed soup did was to condense the soup, take the water out, and provide an affordable product for a growing urban society. So it made soup as a product affordable to more people. Condensing the soup in today's world is reducing its footprint, and by definition is a more environmentally sustainable proposition than regular soup, because you're taking the water out. You don't have to transport the water everywhere. And they put the soup in a can, which is recyclable. So it is inherently a solution for a problem that exists today. Now, I answer your question with another example to say, what if the core origins of your proposition already has sustainability? Now, this sounds crazy, but because I was at Campbell's and no one ever, I don't know, they still don't tell the story. No one listens to me. I don't know why. But what if the core value proposition of what you do actually fits what I'm talking about? It's already there. And so often people just don't know the history. Go talk to the archivist or go talk to the historians on brands. I know the archivist at Coca-Cola, and what they used to do is they had their carriers for the Coke was waxed, was paper or cardboard and waxed, so it was more durable and reusable. So it was like, wait, so in the olden days, they just said, this will last longer if I use the organic material and put wax on it. So indigenous wisdom often has answers to stuff. So his history of brands and products. So often they just need to go look in their archives, go look in their history, and then decide that there is nothing there. But more often than not, they will find these little nuggets and these little examples of things that were done for the right reason or done in the right way. I know some of the first soup flavors were had okra in them. And that's because that's a crop that grew back in whenever they started doing it. And now it's like okra is super cool. It's super food or super vegetable. And I don't know why you wouldn't do okra today, because okra was an original ingredient for those soups. So I think people should look at their history and look at their archives and just do a bit of research on their brand, their business, their founder, where they started, why they did it. And more often than not, they'll find a kernel of opportunity, something interesting that could hopefully help them springboard to doing it more in the future.
Amazing.
Yeah, I've had very similar experiences and a lot of success with client organizations saying, let's look at your origin story. Let's look at your history. Let's really evaluate where you come from, and more importantly, why you came to be in the first place. Right. And so I happen to currently be working with a children's hospital. Of course, a children's hospital, almost by definition, is purpose driven. But they've run up against a limitation, right? The medicine is fit for children. The overall healthcare experience is not.
Right.
Right. And I think that there's I think there's something very challenging for organizations where there's been a high focus on efficiency and a high focus on financialization,
Mm-hmm.
in that organizations really, really have a hard time when the costs are easy to count, but the benefits are hard to measure.
Right.
Right. And so I wonder what thoughts you might have around most effective measurement
Oh,
of this thing called purpose.
well, this is where I am a huge fan of the BAV, and I started talking to Laura because there's an itch now, a new itch I'm scratching. But I want to, before I get to the measurement answer, my new modern 5 Ps of marketing are people, planet, progress, purpose, and prosperity. And I say that because people, planet, progress, purpose, prosperity. I was the person who would say stuff in the meeting that people would start roll their eye. There he goes again. Because when you talk about prosperity, it forces you to think about the human being. You think about the community as well as the financial impact. If you're a CFO, you want to know that you can get the ingredients that for your vegetables, your soup. If you just go back to the soup example, you want to make sure that you can get your ingredients for your tomatoes and all these things. So if climate change is going to cause supply issues, you don't like that risk as a CFO. That's a problem. I don't like that answer. My costs are going up, or I can't fill the supply. So a CFO cares about the prosperity stuff, the planet stuff, the people stuff. If you create an environment at work where people don't feel safe and they belong, 74% of, so measurement is the question. I would say measure different things. So one of the things that I've started researching is what measures should we think about? What I've learned is that 74% of employees at Deloitte are Gen Zs and millennials. If you look at that organization, they have a lot of efforts in the space of purpose. They have programs supporting purpose, and they recognize their people, and they advocate for purposeful actions, because 3/4 of your employees care about meaning and the values at work. And if you don't do it, you won't keep them. So this is a recruitment, retention, advancement people. They just can't and won't get the talent unless they do purpose and they bring it to life in a meaningful way. So I would say, as much as you're measuring product and sales and performance in the marketplace, I would measure internal factors. And I'm now jumping and making different associations. But the other thing I saw is that from Gallup is that only 1/3 of people are engaged at work. So 2/3 of people aren't engaged at work. I repeat, 2/3 are not. And apparently that's worth $2 trillion. So
Wow.
I would do a bit of purpose, because if it's worth a $2 trillion problem of disengaged people, I'd try purpose. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work. But if that's the magnitude of the problem, then wouldn't you want meaning? Wouldn't you want greater motivation? Wouldn't you want greater engagement by finding ways to do this? And purpose absolutely brings that. And so for me, there's as much an internal stakeholder. That's why the people part of my 5 Ps is so critical, because it's the people who buy stuff, but it's the people who work for you. And there's so much evidence and stats there. So, HR departments, I think, love purpose, because it's not, hey, let's hit our numbers. It's let's create a place that you want to be at, and with people that you trust and you want to collaborate with, that you want to stay at, and you want to do good work for, so that the burger I get doesn't have stuff missing, or the patient experience in healthcare isn't terrible because they treat me as people. So those are other measures that I would factor in to consider.
Samuel, I think that we just got to the second half of the episode name, which is why you might be missing the point. And the point, I think, that many marketers and business people are missing is that there's a business case for purpose, and that you need to build that business case, and you need to follow the money. You need to chase the scale. You need to understand the marketplace dynamics beyond the marketing, and really make sure that that is built in and widely socialized, understood. And it sounds like it can be a bit of a negotiation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your tips for people that want to bring more purpose-driven work into the organization, what have you seen people get right? What have you seen that in your own career that gets the eye rolls, that you've changed tact? It sounds like you just gave a great example with the CFO, but how can we help our listeners kind of cut to the chase, avoid the pitfalls, and get right into making purpose happen?
I think I echoed some of that earlier. It starts with people. I think for me, until the algorithms and the AI and the robots take over, we are ultimately working in the world of work of people, and you want to feel good, you want to feel valued, you want to feel that what you do matters. And so I would start with just internally. I keep coming back to some of the internal drivers of organizations, such as their recruitment and their retention processes, their employee policies for healthcare and paternity leave and all these things. There's lots of things that companies and businesses do that impact people, and I would start there, because the more you humanize this, the more you find ways, I think, to find solutions. And also, I think the other thing is, for a lot of organizations, it's who are you trying to serve? And I use that word choicefully, right? So who are you serving, not selling to? I also, another bugbear of mine in this industry is the language of marketing. And so I have now, that's why I call myself a marketing reformer, right? I was a reform marketer, because the word customer, I hate the word consumer, because it means I produce, you consume, and you're like this singular entity that just does what I give you. And I don't like the word citizen might be better, but in the polarized world, people like, non-citizens, citizens. But if you humanize that information, how might you think, and how might you have more empathy with people? So if I'm looking for reasons to drive purpose, I always humanize it. I always bring it back to storytelling. I always try and infuse empathy and feelings into the experience, the conversation, the story, or the data, because I think the bias in the world of work is to quant, is to numbers, is to, hard financial drivers. But if you start personalizing things and personifying things and humanizing things, I think it gives more aperture for people to be more receptive to the power and the principles and the opportunity of purpose. So I've kind of somewhat swerved your answer, because I don't want to make it a rational, here's your list of 7 things, right? Because that goes back to, again, the rational and the reasons and the logic. And for me, let's get to, like, what inspires you? What do you care about? What is a good experience? Tell me about a brand that's treated you well, or tell me about you. Just get into more some of the qual, and I think that opens up aperture for more opportunities just on a human level, before you get into some of the, I think the harder stuff. So that's, I don't know if that's the smart way of answering the question, but I would also say, continue to look at the world and opportunity. So there was a case study I just learned about recently. Vaseline in Thailand have produced a product called Proderma, and that's targeting for the trans community. It was made by and with the trans community. So folks going through the transition, they have skin challenges, skin conditions, and they've come up with a product with and for that community. There's a large number of trans folks in Thailand. There's a 5-year distribution agreement with the company called Watson. So it was done in a way that was with their communities, with their customers, or their people who buy from them, really listening and understanding what they need, and then coming up with a solution, which ultimately was a commercial proposition of a product, but it was serving with and for a community that ultimately is going to be in stores for 5 years and make money. So there is a way of doing this in I think, a more virtuous way than the old way of doing things. So I kind of try and tell stories and show examples, so that you have to feel a bit more than you think about purpose.
Dare we say, bring a little bit more opinion to the party, sounds like.
but it's always evidence-based, though. So there's always an example.
Yes.
I just told you a story of a business with a 5-year roadmap of a product that's been commercialized, that's differentiated in the marketplace, that is, got full market share. You could do all the rational stuff as well, but that is an evidence-based example of why you're losing sales, because your competitor is actually understanding its audience and fulfilling them in a more purposeful way. And when the competitor now sees, oh, look, there's a $5 million, $10 million business that they're not part of, that might get their attention, which is more rational. But the start of it, I think the core of it, is vested in humanity for the win. I'm always backing humanity. The anti-purpose people, I don't know why you argue against purpose. It's like you want humanity and nature to lose. I don't get it.
Well, I tell you what, I think what I'm hearing and what I've certainly observed is that so many organizations are really, really good at thinking about the economics of business,
Mm-hmm.
and really, really not great at thinking about the empathy of business,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I love me some alliteration, so I'm going to talk about both empathy and economics.
Mm-hmm.
And, I also see that there's an awful lot of business that they're great at empathy, but they're horrible at economics. Right. And certainly what I've observed is when you marry the two
Mm-hmm.
in a purpose-based business, then you really have an opportunity to create some runway and some traction. Right. So as an example, in a healthcare environment,
Mm-hmm.
there is a metric that tracks the number of people who check into an emergency department and leave without being seen.
Mm-hmm.
It is the instinct of healthcare to talk about lost care opportunities. Deeply empathic, right? But they have a hard time translating those lost care opportunities to the number of dollars of revenue being lost in a year, which then makes it difficult for them to get the funding necessary to attack the problem, right? And so I wonder if the real secret to driving purpose at scale is to be exceptional at empathy, but also to become exceptional at economics and to be able to talk both through the language of story and through the language of business.
Yeah. As you're talking there, I'm thinking about during COVID. So there was this phenomena during COVID. COVID wasn't funny, so I'm not laughing at that, because obviously a lot of people were harmed and it was challenging for everyone. But there was this phenomenon where halfway through COVID, you saw these TV ads where you'd see the CEO look into the camera like, we're there for you because we care about you.
Purpose washing.
And all of a sudden, these companies made it easy to cancel, easy to pause their subscriptions. If you weren't driving, they gave you refunds on the car and all of these things, which is like, wait, so you were making it hard before. Now you're making it easy because times are tough. Are you going to make it hard again when times are back to normal? So I think now, we are now challenging the former way, because wait, you can do the right thing. Why do you need a crisis to do the right thing? Or why do you stop doing more of the right thing when things go back to the way of work? So I think now we're becoming more conscious in different ways. So for example, I think one of the biggest issues now in the world is return to office. A lot of companies have these return to office mandates. And I saw the CEO of AWS, Amazon Web Services, basically said, this is our policy. We're going to do it whether you like it or not, because I said so. And I'm like, wait, you're one of the tech superstar companies, and there is no evidence to support the return to office. There is no proof of extra productivity. In fact, there's more evidence saying you can be more productive not doing that. And your reason is because I said so. There's literally no evidence to mandate a 5-day return to office. And I'm thinking, darn it, why does purpose have to prove everything when the CEO can just say you got to be back 5 days with no evidence? And are we fine with that? So I think everything should be held to the same standards. So if you're going to demand the highest bar for purpose, I'm going to demand the highest bar for your return to office policy and mandate. Sorry, people watching this, because I made it hard for a lot of CEOs because they don't have the evidence, right? So why does purpose have to carry the burden of being better than proving all these things when other decisions, other factors that affect the world of work, that affect productivity, that affect profitability of an organization are done without the same rigor and criteria? So as I say, I'm a purpose warrior, and I'm going to argue an inconvenient truth. And now, so you return to work policy. You know what? Give me purpose. I'll come back to the office.
Absolutely. And I love that purpose warrior, because you're absolutely right. Why should the case for things that we know actually already have so many positive metrics, we should apply that standard to everything? And the real question here is, can capitalism grow a conscience, right? It grew one pretty quickly, it sounded like, during COVID.
Right.
And so we all should hold companies, businesses, even ourselves, to a higher standard of evidence-based, and really question norms, question the status quo, and make all of this just the norm, that if there is a business case, if there's data, if there is great storytelling around it, let's not accept anything less than that. I mean, I think we've coined another phrase here, Jason. You said it in not so many words, but economic empathy. Economic empathy sounds
the economics of empathy.
Yeah, it sounds like something.
I think JP Morgan just did this. I think they did something. They've opened 100 like branches in economically lower income areas, and I think Jamie Dimon said, we're doing it because it makes us money. It's the right thing to do, and it makes us money, right? And so even who gets banking support and who gets financial resources in their community has biases and disenfranchisement in it. So, and you can do that financially, fruitfully, plus also do the right thing. So I just think economic empathy, I just love following that through to like financial services. And so if the billionaire finance guy says, yes, this is money making, then I think there is biases against purpose because of a lack of empathy, not because of a lack of economics, is the point I'm making. So this is why I want to change the language of marketing and remove some of the words, because if we have more empathy in how we communicate about these things, then we don't just say, oh, we got this product. We're thinking about the community. We're thinking about where we're getting our palm oil from. We're thinking about the supply chain. We're thinking about the workers in the factory and safety and all. We're thinking about ethics in when we're doing these things. So I think the language of business and marketing requires more empathy. It requires more of that EQ. And this is why we're called Purpose Hive, right? Purpose Hive, inspired by bees, and bees as a community are amazing and what they do. So it's actually a matriarchal society. So as a guy, when you learn about bees, you suddenly think, damn, the guys are useless. Basically, women do everything. They run the house. They do everything. They get the food. They get the water. They build honeycombs and everything. And the guys are just basically for procreating. And it's like, dudes, you're useless in the bee world. So in Mother Nature, if you look at nature doesn't make mistakes by and large, right? And so using biodiversity and just thinking about nature-based solutions and constructs, and therefore infusing the words of nature, the language of nature, using words like flourishing and hive and all these things in the world of business, I think helps us be more empathetic. Because when we get very quant statistical, data driven, we end up talking about, let's reduce our costs or increase margin, and you close down a plant and a community, or you start polluting the water from, because you're releasing your toxic chemicals into the river. That's the consequence of this financial decision. Let's use words that communicate the real impact of what you're doing, and you might think differently about it.
Love that. I mean, they don't call her Queen Bee for nothing, right? I mean, that is...
Laura, let's make it clear. You are very much the boss of me. Right? And there's so much evidence in the world that the economics of empathy can be very, very profitable. Right? I mean, Magic Johnson's fortune is far more the result of opening Starbucks and AMC theaters in disadvantaged urban environments than from a Hall of Fame basketball career, right? The evidence is everywhere if only we have the willingness to look.
Right.
Absolutely. Samuel Monnie, any last final words about Purpose Hive? Where can people find you?
They can find me everywhere on the internet. You search Samuel Monnie, you'll find me. No. So Purpose Hive, we're a strategic brand purpose consultancy. We love to do this work. We're passionate about what we do. We're passionate for building community as well. So you'll see us at events. You'll see us hosting events. So you can find us at purposehive.com, purpose-hive.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. So Samuel Monnie on LinkedIn is probably the best place to try and get hold of me. And if you're not already following me, you should. And your inbox will be filled with wonderful ideas, stimulus, and inspirations, because I do have a thing or two to say about all things business, marketing, commerce, with a hue to purpose, but also with the idea of it being about making money and driving revenue, right? So this is not just all about the, ha ha ha, he he. It's about real business and knowing that you can have a positive impact and be profitable.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've had as much fun on Opinion Party as we have had having you, and hope to see you again soon.
I'll be back. If the people want it, I'll be back.
Yes.
Samuel, you've been great. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
So, purpose, have we pivoted, Jason? What do you think?
Wow. I mean, I don't know about the pivot, but dang, purpose. That was awesome, Laura. That's great. Great guest. Love that guy. Though I got to confess, I'm a bit inadequate here, like a reformed marketer on a mission to reform marketing.
I mean,
how good is that? My God.
Right?
No, I think it's clear from the evidence, at least from my reading of the evidence, that purpose can be really, really profitable when purpose is a business imperative, not a marketing campaign. That purpose washing can be damaging and destructive. But when you really bring it to the heart, to the strategy, to the supply chain, to the operating system of a business, there's a lot of profit there, right? And I think that's perhaps a lesson from history that we need to rediscover. What's your take?
Absolutely. I mean, I loved where we netted out, really bringing it back to people and empathy and storytelling, and getting back to how so many purpose-driven organizations and brands are started with just that in mind. How do we make people's lives better, enrich them, solve a problem that many people have, or solve a problem for a few that actually then creates more universal good for many? I love that we are constantly reminding ourselves as marketers, as business people, that ultimately more good in the world is good for everyone, right? And good growth. There is such a thing as good growth. We just have to work harder. I think we just have to work harder. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, and I think re-embrace standards that maybe we've lost touch with. Like, if an organization can't answer the simple question, how are you making my life easier and better? Why would I ever pie you? Why would I ever prefer you? Like, if you don't know what your purpose is, I would encourage us all to figure it out pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And as we wrap it up here, I'll share my purpose with you, Jason.
Oh, God, yes. Let's do it, Laura.
My purpose is to be such a beautiful soul that people crave my vibes at the highest level. I want to vibrate at the highest frequency. And I think everything else just hangs off of that. And yes, I did steal that from a sign at my juice place. But I mean, it spoke to me. And so that's what I strive for.
That's amazing, Laura. I would never even hope to. I can't live up to your standard. I'm not going to pretend that I can. Like, I'm just trying to help businesses get a little bit better. I'm just trying to help businesses figure out that it is a better investment in improving the human condition than the alternative, right? We can discover ways to do the things that are both the right thing and the smart thing.
We can and we will. We're all in this together. Well, thank you all so much for joining Opinion Party. That wraps our episode on purpose. If you like what you heard today, please hit the subscribe button. And for any follow-ups on data or information on where you can get more access to Samuel, our guest, or Jason and I, just check out the show notes. And thank you so much, and have a wonderful, purposeful rest of the day.
Thanks, everybody. Been great to see you again.